Welcome back to Sleepy Historian. Tonight you are not entering a battlefield. There are no charging armies, no clashing steel, no grand speeches echoing in stone halls. Instead, you are stepping into something quieter, something softer, and in many ways something more controlling, because medieval society was not held together mainly by laws. It was not sustained by constant punishment, and it was rarely guided by written instruction. It was held together by things no one wrote down, by expectations, by posture, by glances, by pauses that lasted a breath too long, and if you had lived then, you would have felt those invisible rules pressing against you from the moment you woke. So before we go further, allow your shoulders to lower slightly. Let your breathing become slower. There is nowhere you need to go. Nothing you must solve. You are simply here to observe. In the Middle Ages, survival did not only depend on food or shelter. It depended on fitting. You could be strong, you could be hard-working, you could even be kind. But if you stood where you should not stand, if you wore what you should not wear, if you spoke when silence was expected, the air around you would change, not loudly, just enough, and that quiet shift could follow you for years. Tonight you will slowly come to understand how medieval society functioned, not through dramatic control, but through constant observation. You will feel how a village breathes together, how work becomes identity, how belief becomes attendance, how reputation settles around a person like a second cloak. You will begin to sense what it meant to live in a world where privacy barely existed, and where being unnoticed was often the greatest comfort of all. If you find this journey calming, or if it helps you rest, you may consider subscribing or returning again another night. But there is no urgency in that. Sleepy Historian will be here when you are ready. For now, you are standing at the edge of a village just before dusk. The air is cool. Smoke rises from low chimneys. There is no announcement of rules posted on walls, no signs explaining behavior, and yet every person here understands their place. You would learn quickly. Not because someone explains it to you, but because you feel it. You feel it when you enter the church and notice where others sit. You feel it when conversations soften as you approach. You feel it when eyes measure your clothing, not unkindly, but carefully. The medieval world was small. Most people would never travel far beyond the fields they could walk in a single day, which meant the same faces saw you every morning. The same voices heard your tone. The same minds remembered your smallest misstep. Reputation was not abstract, it was survival. If you borrowed grain, others remembered. If you failed to help at harvest, others noticed. If you laughed at the wrong moment, that too lingered. And yet none of this was spoken directly. No one gathered you at birth to explain the rules. No handbook was placed in your hands. Instead, you absorbed them, like smoke and wool, like cold and stone. You watched how your father stood when speaking to the miller. You observed how your mother lowered her eyes before certain neighbors. You noticed which children played freely and which held back. Slowly, without instruction, you would adjust yourself. Your posture would change. Your voice would soften or firm at certain moments. You would learn when to nod, when to remain still, when to agree, and perhaps most importantly, when to disappear slightly, because in a small medieval village, standing out was rarely an advantage. The fields stretched quietly beyond the cottages. Oxen breathed slowly in wooden pens. The church bell marks time not with urgency, but with repetition. Morning, midday, evening. The days feel long, not dramatic, not exciting, but inside that repetition is a steady pressure. You are always being seen, not cruelly, just continuously, and this constant visibility shapes you. If you are late to Mass, someone will notice. If your tunic is cleaner than usual, someone will notice. If you seem too cheerful after a neighbor's loss, someone will notice. The rules are not written because they do not need to be. They are carried in memory, in glances exchanged across wooden tables, in pauses after a name is mentioned, In the subtle distance someone keeps from another at the well. It is not fear that guides behavior most days. It is rhythm. You match the rhythm to remain safe. You wake when others wake. You work when others work. You rest when others rest. Even belief, which we will come to later, is measured not by private conviction, but by public presence. The medieval world does not demand loud declarations from you. It asks for consistency, steadiness, predictability, and if you provide that, you are allowed to remain. But if you disrupt it, even gently, you may feel something shift, not immediately, not violently, just enough that the next morning greetings are shorter, just enough that help arrives more slowly, just enough that you begin to understand the cost of misalignment. There is something almost hypnotic about this structure, the sameness of days, the repetition of gestures, the quiet endurance of watching and being watched. You would grow used to it. In fact, you might not even recognize it as pressure. It would simply feel like life. And as you settle deeper into this imagined evening, as the last light fades behind low stone walls, as the fire inside a cottage begins its steady glow, you may notice something curious. Here in your present life, you are mostly unseen. You can close a door, turn off a light, speak or remain silent without consequence echoing for years. The contrast is gentle but real. In the medieval world, you belonged completely, and that belonging came with weight. Tonight we will move slowly through that weight. We will walk through the shape of the village itself. We will examine clothing that speaks without words. We will listen to the careful timing of speech. We will feel work settle into the bones. We will observe how belief binds neighbors together. And we will understand how reputation becomes a kind of quiet currency. There is no rush. Time in this world moves like winter light, gradually, without sharp edges. If at any point your thoughts begin to drift, if sleep gently pulls at you, that is perfectly welcome. The village will continue whether you are fully awake or not. The bell will ring. The fire will burn low. The unwritten rules will remain steady. And you, for now, can simply watch. Morning arrives without announcement. There is no clock to declare it. No sharp sound to separate night from day. Only a gradual thinning of darkness, a pale suggestion of light pressing against the small opening that serves as your window. You wake because others wake. You hear a door hinge shift somewhere nearby, a cough carried through damp air, the low murmur of animals stirring in their pens. In a medieval village, the day does not begin with choice. It begins with alignment. You rise slowly, feeling the stiffness in your joints from yesterday's work. The straw beneath you has flattened during the night. The air inside the cottage is cool enough that your breath appears faintly when you exhale. You do not rush. Rushing would imply urgency. Urgency implies disorder, and disorder has no comfortable place here. When you step outside, the village already holds its shape. Cottages cluster in uneven lines, but there is an invisible pattern to their arrangement. The larger homes sit slightly apart, their timber frames thicker, their doors broader. Smaller dwellings lean closer together, as if seeking shared warmth. You understand this pattern without being told. Distance is meaning. The closer you live to the center, the more visible you are. The nearer your door stands to the church, the clearer you're standing. You walk along the narrow path pressed flat by generations of footsteps. Mud is hardened in ridges from yesterday's passage. You step carefully, not wanting to draw attention by slipping or staining yourself too noticeably. Already others are outside. A man pauses near the well. A woman adjusts a basket against her hip. 2 children stand waiting beside a doorway, not running, not shouting, simply observing the morning. You notice where they stand, and you notice where you stand. No one directs you, yet you do not move to the center of the path if someone of higher standing approaches. You angle slightly. Your body shifts almost before your mind decides. This is how you remain steady within the village. You respond before being corrected. The church bell rings once, low and resonant. It does not command. It reminds. You walk toward it with the others. Inside, the air smells faintly of wax and stone. The light entering through narrow windows settles in pale bands across the floor. Benches, worn smooth by decades of use, form rows that are not equal. Some are nearer the front, some rest farther back. No signs explain who belongs where. Yet you hesitate only a moment before choosing your place. You do not sit too close to those who hold land. You do not place yourself among families whose names carry weight. Instead, you settle into the familiar row where you have always sat, neither hidden nor prominent. You feel the quiet comfort of correct placement. Across the aisle, someone shifts. You recognize him as the miller's son. He sits slightly forward of you, not dramatically, but enough. These small adjustments define the village more firmly than walls. When the service begins, voices rise together, uneven, imperfect, but unified. You follow the rhythm, not too loudly, not too softly. Participation is measured not by enthusiasm, but by steadiness. When the priest speaks, you lower your eyes at the same moments as those around you. When others kneel, you kneel. The wooden floor presses against your knees through coarse fabric. You do not linger upright longer than the rest. To move out of rhythm would be to mark yourself, and being marked, here, is rarely comfortable. When the service ends, the congregation flows outward in small clusters. Conversations begin in low tones. You do not interrupt. You do not rush to greet those who stand beyond your usual circle. Instead, you exchange brief words with familiar neighbors. How is your mother? The frost did little damage. Tomorrow may bring rain. Simple statements. Safe ground. In the village square, which is not truly a square but an open widening of the path, people gather near the well. Water must be drawn. Buckets must be filled. You wait your turn. No one announces the order. Yet everyone seems to know it. The widow who struggles with her pail is allowed forward slightly sooner than strict fairness might dictate. The blacksmith whose work sustains many households is acknowledged with a subtle nod and given space. You remain patient. Patience is a form of belonging. As the sun rises higher, the shape of the village becomes clearer in the light. Smoke drifts upward from chimneys in slow threads. Chickens scratch near doorsteps. Dogs move lazily, neither straying far nor challenging anyone. The open field beyond the cottages stretches in pale brown and green. It belongs, in fragments, to different hands. Though the divisions are invisible from where you stand, ownership here is less about fences and more about memory. Everyone knows which strip of earth is yours. If you plowed beyond it, even by accident, the correction would not be loud. It would arrive later, in a measured tone. We noticed the furrow extended slightly. The words would be calm, but they would stay with you, so you remain careful. Throughout the morning you move in patterns already worn smooth by repetition. You greet those you always greet. You avoid imposing on those whose time is not yours to claim. There is comfort in this predictability, and yet there is also weight, because the village remembers. If you speak too boldly one day, the memory lingers. If you fail to appear when others expect you, the absence becomes part of your shape. You begin to understand that identity here is not internal. It is external. You are who others experience consistently. As midday approaches, work draws people outward. Tools are lifted, doors close softly behind them. You walk toward your portion of field. The path narrows between hedges. You pass a group of men discussing repairs to a fence. Their voices pause as you approach, not in suspicion, but in acknowledgement. You nod. They nod. The conversation resumes. You feel the quiet reassurance of recognition. You are neither excluded nor invited further. You exist in the appropriate distance. This balance is delicate. Too distant, and you risk isolation. Too forward, and you risk resentment. The unwritten rules guide you like a gentle current. You float within them because resisting would require more strength than you possess. As afternoon settles, shadows lengthen slowly across the earth. The rhythm of labor fills the air. Steady, unremarkable, persistent. You feel the pull in your shoulders, the gradual ache in your hands. No one praises this, no one comments. It is simply expected. Expectation, here, is the true architecture of the village. The cottages, the church, the well, they are visible structures, but beneath them is something else, a shared understanding that you will remain in your place, not because you are forced, but because the cost of stepping outside it is quiet and lasting. As the sun begins its descent, people drift back toward their homes. There is no signal, no whistle, only the sense that the day has reached its natural edge. You pass by the larger house near the center, its timber beams dark against fading light. You do not look too long. To stare would be impolite. To ignore entirely would appear resentful. So you glance, briefly, neutrally, measured, always measured. By the time you reach your door, the sky has deepened into soft blue-gray. Smoke gathers thicker now, curling against the cooling air. You pause before entering. The village hums quietly around you. You realize something subtle. Stillness protects you. Moving too abruptly, speaking too loudly, placing yourself too centrally, these invite scrutiny. But steadiness allows you to pass through the day without friction. And in a world where survival depends on cooperation, friction is dangerous. So you remain steady. You do not choose your clothing in the way modern people imagine choosing. There is no mirror large enough to admire yourself in. No collection of garments waiting for preference. There is fabric, there is function, and there is permission. When you dress in the morning, your fingers move slowly over cloth that has already lived many years. The wool is coarse in some places, softened in others. Patches overlap patches. Thread has been knotted and re-knotted where seams once gave way. The tunic you wear was not made for fashion. It was made for endurance. And even endurance has limits. You slide your arms through sleeves that hang slightly uneven at the cuffs. One side has been repaired more often. The stitching is visible, not decorative, not hidden. It tells a story of repetition, of preservation. You tie the cord at your waist carefully. Too loose and the garment sags. Too tight and it appears as though you are attempting a silhouette that does not belong to you. Even the shape of your clothing must remain appropriate. In a medieval village, cloth speaks before you do. The weight of wool announces your means. The depth of dye reveals your access. The cleanliness of your hem suggests your habits. You may not think of these things consciously every morning, but others will. Dye is expensive. Deep blues and rich reds are rare among those who work the fields. If you were to appear in a shade too vibrant, questions would form silently. Where did that come from? Who allowed it? What does it suggest? You would feel those questions before anyone voiced them. So your clothing remains within its lane of expectation. Muted brown, weathered gray, faded green softened by many washings. It is not that brighter colors are forbidden in every place, but they are restricted by custom, by law in some regions, by tradition in others. Even where no official decree exists, habit enforces boundaries. Clothing becomes a quiet agreement between you and your neighbors. You will not attempt to appear above your station. In return, you will not be reminded of it. The air outside bites slightly at your exposed skin. You pull your cloak closer. It is heavier than you would prefer, but warmth must outweigh comfort. Still, even warmth has social implications. A cloak lined too richly would attract notice. Fur, for instance, carries meaning. Certain furs are reserved for those of status. If you wore one beyond your standing, it would not be ignored. No one would shout, but someone would mention it later. And mention becomes memory. Memory becomes shape. As you walk through the village, you observe others without staring. The blacksmith's apron is thick with soot, stiff from repeated exposure to heat. It fits him like a declaration. No one mistakes his trade. No one questions his right to wear it. The miller's wife wears linen that appears slightly finer than yours. Not dramatically so, just enough to distinguish her household's steadier income. These differences are subtle, and that subtlety is deliberate. Medieval society does not thrive on spectacle. It thrives on clarity. You know who someone is before they speak, and they know who you are. When fabric tears, you mend it quickly, not because vanity drives you, but because neglect suggests disorder. Disorder suggests unreliability. If your tunic hangs in tatters, it implies that you cannot maintain even yourself. And if you cannot maintain yourself, can you be trusted with communal tasks, with shared tools, with borrowed grain? Appearance is not decoration, it is evidence. Midday sunlight reveals more than candlelight does. Under its brightness, stains become visible. Mud clings to hems. Frayed threads show clearly. You kneel occasionally to brush away dirt before it dries too firmly. You adjust your collar if it slips too low. You retie your cord if it loosens. Not obsessively. Just enough. Just enough to remain steady in presentation. There are moments when you feel the discomfort of it. The wool scratches against your neck. The cloak weighs heavily across your shoulders. In summer, sweat gathers beneath layers that tradition insists remain in place. You might long for lighter fabric, for less constraint, but comfort must bend to conformity, because clothing is not merely protection against weather, it is protection against suspicion. When a traveling merchant arrives, rare but not impossible, the village stirs slightly. His garments differ, his boots are cut differently. The dye of his cloak may be richer. You notice the difference instantly. So does everyone else. He is marked as outsider before he opens his mouth, and you understand that if you ever dressed too differently, you too would feel that thin line of separation. It is not hostility, not necessarily, just awareness. You return home briefly in the afternoon to retrieve a tool left behind. Inside the dim interior, you untie your cloak and hang it carefully. You smooth the fabric with your palm. You notice where it thins near the shoulder, where another patch will soon be required. Cloth ages alongside you. Over time, garments soften and sag as your body does. They carry the memory of labor and stretched seams and worn elbows. When a garment becomes too damaged to wear publicly, it does not disappear. It becomes lining. It becomes a child's smaller tunic. It becomes rags for cleaning tools. Nothing is wasted. Because waste suggests excess. Excess invites scrutiny, even during feast days, those rare moments of slight celebration. Clothing remains measured. Yes, a cleaner tunic might be worn. Yes, a belt might be tightened more neatly. But you would not suddenly transform yourself. To do so would unsettle others. Consistency is comfort. You remember once seeing a young man attempt to adopt a slightly finer hat after a profitable season. It was not outrageous, only slightly above his usual means. The glances lasted weeks. No one confronted him directly, but the subtle distance in conversation lingered until the hat quietly disappeared. He returned to his previous shape, and the village exhaled. As evening approaches, you sit near the fire, needle in hand. The light flickers against your fingers as you guide thread through cloth. The motion is slow, repetitive. You mend not only fabric but your place. Each stitch reinforces continuity. Each repaired seam says, I remain who I was yesterday. The fire cracks softly. Outside the sky darkens. You hold the garment up briefly to inspect your work. It will endure another season, perhaps two. You feel a small sense of relief, because warmth matters. But belonging matters more. If your clothing keeps you within the quiet permissions of the village, if it announces neither ambition nor neglect, then it does its most important work. And as you fold the garment carefully beside you, you understand something without words. In this world, fabric does not simply cover the body, it defines the boundaries within which you are allowed to move. You learn early that words are heavier than they appear. They leave the mouth lightly enough. They disappear into the air, but they do not vanish. In a small medieval village, speech settles. It lingers in corners. It attaches itself to memory. It returns at moments you do not expect. So you become careful, not anxious, not fearful, just measured. Morning conversation often begins in fragments. A nod near the well, a brief comment about frost, a remark about the state of the road. No one speaks at length unless there is reason. You notice how long others pause before answering a question, how they tilt their heads slightly, how they glance sideways briefly to see who else is listening. You begin to mirror this. If someone asks about a neighbor, you respond with balance. She manages as best she can. Not praise, not criticism, a middle path, because leaning too far in either direction creates shape around you. And once shaped, you are remembered. You become aware of volume. Too loud suggests boldness. Too quiet suggests secrecy. There is a tone that fits. You aim for it. Inside the church, speech narrows. Words become formulaic, repeated, safe. Outside in the open air, language loosens slightly, but only within boundaries. You observe how older men speak more slowly, how younger ones sometimes interrupt, only to correct themselves quickly when eyes shift toward them. Timing is everything. When the blacksmith finishes a sentence, there is a natural pause. You do not rush to fill it. Silence is not uncomfortable here. It is space. You let it remain. At midday, while working near others in the fields, conversation drifts in and out. Long stretches pass without words at all. The rhythm of labor replaces speech. You feel the relief of that, because silence protects you. In silence you cannot misstep. Still, there are moments when speech is required, when someone asks directly for your opinion, when a decision must be acknowledged. In those moments you choose carefully, not because you are deceitful, but because clarity must align with safety. If a neighbor complains about the harvest, you nod. It has been difficult. This acknowledges reality without assigning blame. Blame travels, and once it attaches to your name, it stays. You remember once hearing of a man in a nearby village who spoke too sharply about a minor official. It was not rebellion, not dramatic, only frustration, expressed too openly. Months later, when assistance was needed, his request met delay. No one accused him outright, but memory lingered. So you learn. Words must not only be true, they must be placed correctly. In the evening, when villagers gather briefly near doorways before retreating inside, conversations shift toward softer topics. Weather, tools, minor ailments. No one discusses deeply personal doubt. No one challenges belief openly. Even disagreements are framed gently. I may have misunderstood. Perhaps there is another way. You notice how people soften their assertions. Certainty is dangerous unless supported by position. If you are not the eldest, not the landholder, not the priest, you speak with modest framing. This is not humiliation. It is choreography. You begin to sense conversation as something almost physical, like weaving. Threads crossing, tightening, loosening. Too much tension and the fabric strains. Too little and it frays. At times you feel the urge to speak more freely, to express an idea fully without trimming its edges. But you feel, too, the invisible border around that impulse. You imagine the way faces might still, the way glances might shift, and you let the fuller thought remain inside. There are things in this world that exist only privately. They are not meant for communal air. Gossip, of course, exists. It moves in low tones. It travels through side conversations. But even gossip follows rules. You do not invent. You repeat cautiously. You frame rumors as uncertainty. I heard it said, and even then, you watch the listener's reaction carefully. If they stiffen, you withdraw. If they lean closer, you lower your voice further, because participation in gossip binds you to its consequences. You begin to understand that language here is less about expression and more about placement. To speak correctly is to remain aligned. To speak wrongly is to create distance. And distance in a small world can feel vast. One evening, while standing near the edge of the village as dusk settles, you find yourself beside an older woman known for sharp memory. She mentions a name from years past. Do you remember how he boasted that summer? Her tone is neutral, not condemning. You nod slowly. You were younger then. You remember only fragments, but the story remains vivid in her voice. A single boast, repeated too often, shaped that man standing long after the season ended. You realize that speech here does not fade with time. it accumulates. So you choose your words as though they are seeds. Some will grow, some will wither, but you do not always control which. As night deepens and doors close one by one, silence spreads across the village. It is thick but not heavy. You sit near your fire and replay small exchanges from the day. Did you speak too abruptly at the well? Did your laughter linger too long? You do not obsess, but you consider, because consideration is protection. Over time, you become adept at reading the slight lift of an eyebrow, the pause before response, the change in posture that signals approval or discomfort. This is your true education. Not letters, not scrolls, but tone. You learn when to end a conversation gracefully, when to excuse yourself without appearing dismissive. I must see to the animals. No one questions that. It is a safe exit. And so gradually you build a reputation not of brilliance, not of boldness, but of steadiness. You speak when appropriate, you listen often, you avoid extremes. Silence becomes your ally, because silence cannot be misquoted. As you lay down at night, the fire dimming to embers, you recognize something subtle. In this world, survival does not always belong to the strongest. It belongs to the measured. And sometimes the safest language is the one you never speak at all. There is a quiet moment just after waking when you might imagine your life could have been otherwise. It does not last long. The thought fades as soon as your hands begin their familiar search in the dim light, reaching for the same tools, the same garments, the same path that has been walked for years. In the medieval world, work is not discovered, it is inherited. Your father did not gather you one evening to ask what you wished to become. There was no list of possibilities, no careful weighing of talents. There was land, there was trade, there was necessity, and you stepped into what was already there. If your father shaped wood, you learned the feel of grain beneath your fingertips before you could read. If your mother spun wool, you understood the rhythm of spindle and thread before you understood seasons in any formal way. You did not choose, you absorbed. Tools are passed down like stories, worn smooth by repetition. The handle of your plow fits your palm because it fits your father's first. The weight of a hammer feels balanced because generations adjusted it before you. There is comfort in this, and also constraint. When you rise before dawn and step into the cool air, you do not wonder what task awaits. You already know. The field needs tending. The grain must be checked. The animals must be fed. Repetition structures your days so completely that deviation feels unnatural. You move through morning tasks with a steadiness that comes from long practice. Your body remembers motions even when your mind drifts. There is no applause, no recognition beyond the simple acknowledgement that you are doing what you are meant to do. That is enough. In the village, identity is almost entirely tied to labor. You are not introduced by personality. You are not introduced by personality. You are introduced by function. He is the cooper's son. She is the weaver's daughter. They keep bees. They mend shoes. Your name is often secondary, and you accept this without resentment, because it is how everyone is known. Mid-morning light spreads across the fields in thin bands. The soil is damp beneath your boots. You lean into the weight of your tool, feeling the gradual pull in your shoulders. Work here is not frantic, it is persistent. You do not hurry because the land does not respond to haste. It responds to rhythm. As you work, you recall how, as a child, you watched older hands move with quiet efficiency. You mimicked them long before you understood why each motion mattered. Correction was gentle, but firm. Not that way. Again, slower. Over time, the corrections stopped. You no longer required instruction, and without realizing it, you became the example someone else might watch. The idea of leaving this occupation, of seeking something entirely different, is almost abstract. Travel is rare, opportunity narrower still. To abandon your inherited work would raise questions. Why does he not value his father's craft? Is something wrong? Is he unreliable? Even ambition can be interpreted as instability, And instability is dangerous in a world built on interdependence. If you cease to farm, who would maintain your strip of land? If you refused your trade, who would replace the services your neighbors rely on? The village is a structure of linked functions. To remove yourself from your place is not merely personal, it unsettles others, so you remain. And remaining becomes identity. By midday, sweat gathers along your spine, despite the cool air. Your hands ache in familiar ways, not sharply, not urgently, just steadily. You pause briefly to drink water from a small wooden cup. The taste is plain, the pause short. There is no scheduled break, only the natural rhythm of fatigue and recovery. You think sometimes of those born into roles heavier than yours, the blacksmith's son, whose arms grow strong early, the miller's daughter, whose back bends over grain year after year. Each inherits not only a skill but a shape. Labor sculpts the body slowly. Your shoulders broaden or stoop according to what you repeat most often. Your hands thicken or roughen depending on your tools. There is a quiet dignity in this shaping, but it is not romantic. It is simply necessary. In the afternoon, you pass by another worker whose trade differs from yours. You exchange brief acknowledgement. A nod, perhaps a short comment about the weather. There is respect in shared endurance. No one envies loudly. No one complains extensively. Complaints suggest weakness, and weakness well understood privately is rarely displayed. As the light begins to soften, you gather your tools carefully. You inspect them before storing them away. A cracked handle must be mended quickly, a dull edge sharpened before tomorrow, because your ability to work consistently determines your security. If you falter for too long, from illness, injury, or fatigue, your absence becomes visible, and visible absence invites concern. Concern can turn into quiet doubt, so you care for your tools as you care for yourself. They are extensions of your reliability. Returning toward the village, you feel the slow heaviness in your legs. The day has not been dramatic, nothing extraordinary occurred, and yet you are tired, not in crisis, just worn. You pass children playing briefly in the fading light. Even they imitate tasks in their games, small wooden sticks used as pretend tools, gestures copied from adults. They are already practicing inheritance, already learning where they will stand. When you enter your home, the scent of smoke greets you. The interior glows softly with firelight. You sit down, not collapsing, not dramatically, just lowering yourself into rest. You feel the imprint of the day in your muscles. There will be no praise tonight for completing what was expected. There will be no celebration for steady effort. But there will be continuity, and continuity here is everything, because predictability feeds you, reliability sustains you, inheritance anchors you. You may never choose your occupation, but by fulfilling it quietly, consistently, without spectacle, you secure your place within the larger pattern. And in a world governed by unwritten rules, that quiet security is the closest thing to freedom you will know. There are days when the work feels almost weightless, not easy, just familiar enough that your body moves without protest. And then there are days when even lifting your hands requires intention. The medieval year does not rush forward in dramatic bursts. It stretches. It unfolds in long sequences of repetition, each season pressing its own slow pressure against you. Winter teaches stillness. Summer teaches persistence. Spring and autumn move between them, never entirely gentle. You wake before first light again. The darkness is thicker in winter, thinner in summer, but the pattern remains unchanged. You rise because the day requires it. Cold air bites more sharply during certain months. When you step outside, your breath forms a steady cloud before your face. Frost clings to the edges of thatched roofs. The ground crunches faintly beneath your boots. Work does not pause for cold. It simply slows. You notice how sound travels differently in winter. Tools striking wood echo more clearly. Footsteps seem louder against hardened earth. Conversations shrink even further. No one wastes warmth on unnecessary speech. You pull your cloak tighter. Your fingers stiffen around wooden handles. Tasks that are simple in warmth demand more patience now. You do not curse the season, you endure it, because every winter has come before this one, and every winter someone has endured. Time in this world is not measured by hours but by light. In summer, light lingers late. It stretches across fields long after your muscles begin to protest. You continue working because the sun has not yet released you. Fatigue becomes background noise. You bend, you lift, you carry, you repeat. Sweat darkens fabric. Your back tightens slowly. There is no sudden collapse, only gradual depletion. You glance occasionally at others in the field. They move at similar pace. No one sprints, no one struts, no one stops abruptly. The village maintains a collective rhythm of effort. To move too quickly would suggest impatience. To move too slowly would suggest weakness. So you calibrate yourself carefully. The pace of endurance is not heroic, it is sustainable. Midday arrives quietly. The sun reaches its highest point. You pause briefly to drink, perhaps to chew on coarse bread saved from morning. There is no elaborate meal in the field, only enough to continue. You sit for a moment on the edge of your assigned strip of land. The earth smells faintly of damp soil and plant matter. Your legs tremble slightly but not alarmingly. You watch the horizon. It does not change quickly. Clouds drift without urgency. Birds move in slow arcs overhead. You understand that your work too must mirror this steadiness. There are no dramatic deadlines, only the understanding that if today's labor is neglected, tomorrow becomes heavier. This is how survival pressure exists here, not as sudden danger, but as accumulation. If you fail to plant in time, hunger waits months away. If you fail to mend a fence, animals wander days later. Consequences move slowly, but they move. You stand again before stiffness settles too deeply into your joints. The afternoon stretches longer than you expect. Shadows inch across the soil. Sweat cools uncomfortably against your skin when wind passes through. Fatigue is no longer sharp. It is dull and constant. You do not resist it. You fold it into yourself. There are moments, perhaps in late summer, when the heat becomes its own burden. Air thickens. Breath feels heavier. Clothing clings. Still, you continue. You cannot abandon the field because of discomfort. The crop does not wait for your preference. At times, you notice someone slowing slightly, adjusting posture, rolling their shoulders. No one comments. Endurance is personal but shared. You know that tomorrow will bring the same pattern, and the next day, and the next. It is not monotony exactly. It is continuity. The bell from the village rings faintly in the distance as light begins to soften. It does not command immediate return. It marks transition. You gather your tools with careful movements. You inspect them briefly, even when your hands tremble with exhaustion. Maintenance cannot be neglected. If your body fails you, tools must compensate. If tools fail you, effort doubles. You walk back toward the cottages in slow procession with others. No one speaks much. There is a collective quiet that falls over the path. Not sorrow, not despair, just depletion. Smoke rises from chimneys ahead. The sight brings subtle relief. Not celebration, just confirmation that the day is nearly done. Inside your home, you lower yourself beside the hearth. The fire's warmth spreads gradually through stiff limbs. Your hands rest loosely on your knees. They pulse faintly with residual effort. There will be small tasks, yet perhaps sharpening a blade, checking a strap, mending a tear. Rest is never absolute. It is layered. You sit in silence for a long moment, listening to the quiet crackle of wood. The world beyond your walls continues at its steady pace. Someone closes a door nearby. A distant animal shifts in its pen. Your fatigue feels deep, but not dramatic. It is the kind of tiredness that settles into bone over years. You begin to understand that endurance here is not a test to be passed once. It is a state of being. No feast ends it. No holiday erases it. Even during winter, when fields lie dormant beneath frost, Other labors replace them, repairing tools, tending animals, hauling wood. The pace changes, but it never disappears. You think briefly of those who falter, those who fall ill during harvest, those whose injuries linger longer than expected. The village adjusts slightly, offering assistance when possible. But extended weakness strains the pattern. Everyone carries as much as they can, because everyone must. As night deepens, your eyelids grow heavy. You stretch out on your bedding slowly, careful not to move too abruptly. Muscles complain quietly as they settle. Tomorrow will come. The light will return. The field will remain. The pace of endurance will continue, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, and you will rise into it again. Because in this world, survival belongs not to those who burn brightly, but to those who last. When the workday ends, it does not end completely. It thins. It changes shape. You step inside as evening settles into the village, and for a moment the quiet feels like relief. The air within your cottage is warmer. The fire glows steadily, casting soft amber light against stone walls. But rest here is not absence of effort. It is gentler effort. You sit on a low stool near the hearth. Your legs are heavy. Your hands rest open on your knees, still faintly trembling from repetition. Across from you, someone stirs a small pot suspended over flame. The scent is simple. Broth, perhaps a handful of grains, nothing elaborate. Enough. You do not collapse into sleep. There are small tasks waiting, a strap that needs tightening, a tear in cloth that cannot wait until morning, a handle that must be checked for cracks. Even in stillness, usefulness continues. You take up a small blade and begin scraping away roughness from a wooden tool handle. The motion is slow, deliberate. The sound is soft. Wood against metal, rhythmic, unhurried. This is rest, because your body no longer strains against the full weight of the day, yet your hands remain active, maintaining continuity. In the medieval world, idleness carries suspicion, not dramatic suspicion, just quiet observation. If you were seen frequently sitting without purpose, especially while others labored, it would be remembered. He rests often. She does little. The words would not be sharp, but they would linger. So even your rest must appear steady. You learn the art of visible usefulness, sitting by the fire with a spindle in hand, sharpening tools slowly while listening to conversation, repairing a basket while nodding at a neighbor's story. You are never entirely inactive. Children absorb this lesson early. They are allowed moments of play, yes, small bursts of running near the door before darkness deepens. But even they are gradually given tasks suited to their size. Holding thread, fetching water, sorting kindling. Activity becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. As the fire settles lower, conversation flickers gently through the room. No one recounts grand ambitions. Instead, you hear small updates. The fence near the east field leans again. The frost was lighter this morning. Tomorrow may bring wind. These are not exciting topics, but they are stabilizing. They remind everyone that the world remains consistent. You contribute occasionally, offering a short observation. You do not dominate. Even in your own home, you are aware of rhythm. After eating, you rinse a wooden bowl with careful movements. Water is not wasted. Nothing is wasted. You hang the bowl to dry, aligning it with others in neat order. Order is quiet reassurance. You notice how the tools along the wall are placed in familiar positions. Each has a location. Each returns there nightly. If one were missing, it would be immediately apparent. Absence stands out in small spaces. You stretch your legs slightly, feeling the ache deepen into something almost dull and comforting. Outside, night thickens. The village quiets gradually. A distant door closes. An animal shifts. Through the small opening of your window, you see only darkness now, punctuated by faint glows from neighboring cottages. Each glow contains similar scenes, similar small repairs, similar measured conversations, similar exhaustion folded into routine. There is comfort in shared sameness. You imagine the blacksmith across the path inspecting his hammer in firelight, the miller's family sorting grain for tomorrow. No one is idle. Even those too old for heavy labor contribute in smaller ways, telling stories that reinforce memory, advising on planting times, watching children. Aging does not excuse usefulness. It alters it. You recall an older man who, after his strength faded, sat daily near the well carving small wooden pegs for communal use. He did not speak much, but his hands never stilled. The village respected that, not because the pegs were remarkable, but because he remained engaged. To withdraw completely from visible contribution is to thin your presence, and thinning presence invites questions. So even as your eyelids grow heavy, you pick up the needle once more to secure a final stitch in a fraying seam. The thread passes through cloth with gentle resistance. You pull it tight. You tie it off carefully. One more small act of maintenance. One more quiet proof that you remain reliable. As the fire burns lower, conversation fades into softer tones. Words become fewer. Silence stretches comfortably between sentences. This silence is different from daytime silence. It is not strategic. It is earned. You lean back slightly against the wall, feeling the warmth seep into your spine. Your hands finally rest without tool or thread, but even now you remain aware of posture. Slouch too deeply and it appears careless. Sit too rigidly and it suggests tension. There is a middle position, relaxed but alert. You have practiced it for years. Eventually, one by one, the small tasks conclude. Tools are returned to their places. The pot is emptied. The embers are adjusted. You prepare your bedding slowly. Straw rustles softly beneath you. The cloak you wore earlier now serves as additional warmth. You lie down not with dramatic relief, but with gradual surrender. Your body sinks into stillness carefully. You think briefly of tomorrow's work. The tasks are already known. There is no surprise waiting. That predictability allows you to close your eyes without fear. In this world, rest is not escape, it is preparation. You rest so that you may rise again into usefulness. And as sleep edges closer, you understand something subtle but steady. In medieval society, being seen working is as important as working itself. Even your quietest hours contribute to your reputation, so you allow sleep to come gently. Not as collapse, not as defeat, but as part of the same rhythm that has guided the day. Because tomorrow, before first light, you will rise again, and the pace of endurance will continue. Night drifts into early morning, and the village sleeps under a thin layer of mist. Even the animals move quietly, as though mindful of the world's subtle rules. You rise again before first light, aware that your presence is already expected, even in silence. The first task is always small, a sweep of the floor, a check on the hearth embers. The movement is deliberate, measured, habitual. Each gesture reinforces your place. It is a world where every motion matters, and even absence is noticed. Hospitality is one of the most delicate rules here. Visitors do not announce themselves in the way travelers of the modern world might. Instead, they appear at the edge of your awareness, a shadow under the archway, a soft sound of hooves in the distance, a knock barely louder than the wind against the door. When a neighbor arrives unexpectedly, you prepare, not for spectacle, not for warmth, but for propriety. You do not offer your best linens or richest food. You do not speak too loudly, laugh too freely, or draw attention to your own possessions. Everything is measured. Guests must be recognized without being flattered. They must be made comfortable without undermining your household's quiet stability. Your role is to balance generosity with humility, to acknowledge without overstating. You pour water into cups, not too eagerly, not too carelessly. The bowls are passed in the order dictated not by voice, but by understanding, age, household standing, proximity to the hearth, subtle memory of yesterday's interactions. Even small mistakes in sequence would ripple quietly through perception. Conversation during these visits is cautious. You offer words that are pleasant, neutral, and measured. Too much enthusiasm would be odd. Too much criticism could linger. Instead, you aim for balance. You nod at stories, repeat minor details when appropriate, and let the visitor set the rhythm of discussion. Even silence carries meaning. A pause is not emptiness. It is recognition of shared understanding. When a guest leaves, the absence is as meaningful as their presence. You observe where they step, how they move, and how quickly they withdraw. This teaches you subtle cues of hierarchy. Hierarchy is woven into every gesture. A bow of the head is not merely polite. It acknowledges standing. A nod of the hand signals recognition without challenging authority. A seat chosen near the hearth demonstrates neither arrogance nor disregard. Even the position of your hands on the table can communicate readiness, respect, or restraint. Children watch. They imitate the patterns they see, long before understanding the reason. One misstep, a glance too bold, a foot placed incorrectly, will be corrected gently, almost imperceptibly. But correction is constant. It is how knowledge passes from one generation to the next, without need for written rules. You recall the day a traveling merchant arrived last spring. His cloak was rich, his boots cut sharply, his manner confident. The villagers observed without comment, adjusting their own postures subtly. Conversations softened, movements slowed. Even work paused slightly, as if to accommodate the unspoken arrival. You understood then how deeply the unwritten rules permeated daily life. They governed perception, movement, and speech. They dictated how to stand, how to sit, how to pour water, how to fold cloth. Following them was survival not only in the sense of food and shelter, but in social safety. As the morning progresses, your tasks continue alongside this quiet social dance. You fetch water for washing. You sweep pathways. You repair small sections of fence. Your labor is both physical and symbolic, an assertion that you understand your place, that you remain predictable, that you participate in continuity. The older villagers provide guidance, often without words. A hand placed briefly on a shoulder, a glance toward a particular tool, a slight nod toward a neighbor. These are lessons in alignment. You absorb them unconsciously, reinforcing your understanding of hierarchy and propriety. By midday, sunlight spreads across the village square. Shadows lengthen slowly along the cobblestones. Children move carefully around their elders, echoing subtle gestures. Animals shift, never straying far, their routines integrated into human patterns. Even the pace of work reflects unspoken expectation. Labor is steady, never frantic, never dramatic. Effort is visible but controlled. Too rapid, and it suggests impatience or pride. Too slow, and it hints at weakness or distraction. The rhythm itself becomes a measure of character. Meals are small, deliberate affairs. No one eats too quickly, no one lingers excessively. Each gesture, each choice of portion, each nod of acknowledgement contributes to the invisible fabric of social understanding. Eating is never purely sustenance. It is practice in propriety. By late afternoon the sun tilts, softening across stone and thatch. Visitors may come and go, but the village continues its quiet internal rhythm. The rules have been observed, hierarchy maintained, hospitality rendered without drama. Silence, speech, and movement have reinforced your place, and in the calm of that long, measured day, you notice something that may escape the untrained eye. The world itself seems designed to teach compliance, gently. Paths are narrow, windows low, hearths centrally placed. Each element guides you, shapes you, instructs you without words. You realize that survival here is less about strength or cleverness, and more about careful observation, quiet adaptation, and steady adherence. To exist comfortably, to move without friction, to participate without disruption. These are the true accomplishments of everyday life. By evening, the village resumes its pattern of stillness. Smoke rises in thin threads from chimneys. Shadows darken corners. The low murmur of distant voices punctuates the calm. The world waits for night to gather fully, for the firelight to glow, and for quiet reflection to settle across the land. And as you prepare for the night, the lessons of the day remain. The way you stand, the words you speak, the order in which you serve. These form the invisible lattice that supports life in the village. You do not see it fully at first, perhaps you never do, but your body remembers, your mind internalizes, your movements align, and with every repetition the unwritten rules weave themselves more securely into the rhythm of your existence. The day stretches on in quiet repetition. You move through it almost as if guided by invisible lines, each step aligned with what has been done before. Every motion, every gesture, every glance carries meaning that you only slowly come to perceive. You notice how even the smallest acts are measured. The way you lift a bucket of water, the angle at which you set it down, the rhythm of your steps across worn stone or packed earth. Each has been performed countless times before. Each carries expectations, not rules written in ink, but rules etched into memory and body. Meals are small lessons in order. Bread is broken in measured portions. Salt is distributed lightly. Even the placement of utensils, wooden spoons, carved knives, small bowls, follows unspoken sequence. To upset it would be noticed, not necessarily scolded, but remembered. Conversation is similarly precise. You learn to speak softly but not too softly, to pause before replying, to mirror the tone of others, neither overstepping nor retreating. Children are taught to respond to questions with honesty measured against propriety. They learn early that speaking too freely, even truthfully, can carry consequences. In public, you walk with awareness. Paths are narrow, courtyards small. You observe the position of neighbors, the angle of roofs casting shadows across stone, the placement of tools and wagons. Nothing is accidental. Everything communicates. There is comfort in this order, if one understands it. Predictability protects you. It cushions the body and mind against conflict. It allows labor to continue without friction. You can move within this framework without drawing attention, without inviting scrutiny, without disrupting rhythm. Still, awareness is constant. You feel the gaze of others, not as threat, but as measurement. Each glance confirms your alignment with expectation. You adjust posture unconsciously. A tilt of the head, a straightening of the shoulders, a lowering of the hand. These are small calibrations repeated endlessly, so subtle that an outsider might not perceive them, but those who know you do. You watch an elder sitting near the well, his hands resting lightly on a cane. Children approach, but not too closely, their steps slow as they pass. The elder nods, a small acknowledgement of presence, a reminder of hierarchy. Nothing is verbal, yet everything is understood. Even gestures toward animals reflect understanding. Feeding is measured. Paths to pasture are walked in silence. A sudden noise might startle livestock, signaling inattention or disregard. Care and repetition prevent such moments. Responsibility is not announced. It is demonstrated. By afternoon, fatigue settles lightly into limbs. Not overwhelming, but steady. You pause for a moment to rest your hands, smooth the fabric of your clothing, adjust your sleeves. These are small actions, yet they maintain presentation. They maintain order. They demonstrate understanding. You observe a neighbor adjusting the tether of a goat. His movements are deliberate. You notice that even the positioning of the rope, the gentle tightening of a knot, communicates experience and adherence to practice. There is no rush. There is no need. Precision itself is a form of respect. Tea or small ale is shared quietly. Cups are passed in sequence, first to the eldest, then to the most responsible, then to others. Every movement is observed. Every pour carries significance. To act hastily or neglect a step would leave ripples in perception. You act carefully, aware of each detail. Even laughter is measured. A smile, a quiet chuckle, a brief lifting of the lips, all are permissible in moderation. Overexpression is read as audacity or carelessness. Underexpression might suggest displeasure or detachment. You calibrate constantly, without thinking, so that the world flows without tension. Even the air itself seems to enforce these codes. Mist drifting through the square, smoke rising gently from chimneys, animals moving quietly in pens. The environment is a subtle teacher, reminding you to tread softly, to adjust motion, to honor the rhythms of those around you. As evening approaches, you feel the faint chill of dusk. You move indoors to complete small household tasks, tying a loose strap, sweeping floor, checking firewood. Each motion is deliberate. Each adjustment maintains the unspoken order of the household. By nightfall, the village becomes a tapestry of small lights and quiet movement. Each household repeats patterns familiar to themselves and observed by neighbors. Every door closed, every hearth stoked, every tool returned to place. These are acts of discipline, of participation, of subtle communication. You lie down in the dim interior, aware of the slow accumulation of the day. Muscles ache gently, hands feel stiff. You reflect briefly on interactions, gestures, and moments. The lessons are never spoken aloud, but they embed themselves quietly, shaping your awareness, your posture, your attention. In this way, manners are not mere decorum. They are survival. They are stability. They are the invisible scaffolding on which every day is built. To observe them is to exist safely. To ignore them is to invite misalignment, which in a small world is noticeable. The fire dwindles. Embers glow faintly. Shadows stretch across walls. Silence thickens, but not oppressively. You allow it to fill the space, letting fatigue, understanding, and habit settle together. Tomorrow, as always, the day will begin again, and you will rise into it, moving through its patterns with quiet care, as the unwritten rules continue to guide, protect, and shape existence. As night deepens, the village slows almost imperceptibly. Doors close one by one. Smoke from chimneys rises in thin, curling trails, carrying the scent of embers, bread, and small fires. The world feels compressed, intimate, and still. You notice that even in the quiet, observation continues. Every action leaves an impression. Every pause is interpreted. Hierarchy is reinforced not only in speech or work, but in attention itself. Walking along narrow lanes, you adjust your pace to match what is expected. Not too fast, not too slow. You maintain spacing from neighbors that feels natural, respectful, measured. The rhythm of your steps signals awareness, attentiveness, understanding. Silence is as important as sound. Footfalls, doors, the faint rustle of cloth are part of a subtle communication network. You learn to listen without responding, to absorb without acting, to read intent in the smallest gesture. A raised brow, a tilt of the head, the way someone leans slightly forward, all carry information. This is the art of observation. It is not passive, it is active. It trains the mind and shapes the body. Your posture becomes both signal and shield. Your glances carry awareness without intrusion. You acknowledge presence without overstepping. Even meals reinforce this. When sitting with neighbors, bread is broken in sequence. Cups of ale or water are passed slowly, in order of age, responsibility, or prior service. Speech is quiet, respectful, and intentional. Laughter is gentle, restrained. Silence punctuates action as much as conversation does. You see young children learn the same lesson. They mimic the gestures of elders, practicing small movements with intent. Each tilt of a head, each nod, each careful step becomes rehearsal for adulthood. Even games are subtle lessons in hierarchy and attention. Work in the evening mirrors this. Fires must be tended, animals checked, tools inspected. Every movement conveys reliability and steadiness. Even if no one watches, the awareness that someone could be observing is enough to maintain care. You begin to understand that respect is less about formality and more about consistency. To move predictably, to speak in measured tones, to carry yourself steadily, to observe before acting, all of these are demonstrations of understanding. They do not require speech or notice. Their power lies in subtle influence. Sometimes a stranger passes through. You observe them carefully, noting posture, gestures, and tone. You respond not with friendliness alone, but with measured acknowledgement. They are recognized but never overly welcomed or dismissed. The balance itself is a demonstration of understanding the unwritten rules. Even the night itself teaches restraint. Darkness limits movement. Shadows hide missteps. Cold seeps into the edges of clothing and skin, reminding you of your body's vulnerability. You move deliberately, maintaining warmth, conserving energy, and respecting your own limits without stopping completely. Your eyes adjust to dim light, noticing details previously overlooked: the curve of a roof, the subtle slope of a path, the slight leaning of a fence post. Each element conveys something about its maker, about who maintains it, about what has been respected or neglected. Observation is not passive curiosity. It is understanding survival within social and physical space. You recognize that survival depends equally on action and perception. A misplaced step, an inattentive glance, a gesture that seems too abrupt can ripple quietly through the community. Nothing is dramatic, yet everything is meaningful. By late evening your body is heavy with fatigue, yet your mind remains attentive. You sit near the hearth, hands resting loosely, watching firelight dance across stone and wood. The village's rhythm continues, soft and persistent, echoing through walls, streets, and courtyards. You reflect briefly on what has been learned, how to speak and when to remain silent, how to move and when to pause, how to observe without drawing attention, how to respect hierarchy without fear, and how to maintain presence without spectacle. These lessons are not written. They are absorbed, repeated, and perfected over time. Even as your eyelids droop, you understand that the world does not require declaration. It requires awareness. It requires subtle alignment with the patterns that have persisted long before you and will persist long after. The night continues. Embers glow. Shadows lengthen and dissolve. Quiet settles across the village like a soft sheet, holding and shaping everything within it. You allow yourself to drift into sleep, carried by habit, observation, and understanding. Your place has been noted, your respect demonstrated, your awareness recorded silently by the world and its inhabitants. Tomorrow, as always, the same rules will continue to shape life. You will rise, you will move, you will observe, and you will act. And the cycle, quiet and persistent, will repeat itself, guiding every motion, every glance, every breath. Morning arrives again with the thin, pale light of early dawn. The village exhales softly as you rise, aware that the day begins slowly yet insistently. You step outside into chill air, feeling the weight of yesterday lingering in your muscles, the ache in your hands from repeated labor. It is familiar, almost comforting in its steadiness. The first task is simple: check the hearth. A thin curl of smoke signals the fire has subsided overnight. You add small twigs, adjusting placement carefully, listening to the soft crackle as warmth returns. You are not hurried. There is no urgency. The fire simply needs tending, and tending it is enough to occupy attention. Next comes the sweep of the floor. Straw and dust, footprints and crumbs from the night, are brushed gently into corners. Each motion is deliberate. You notice subtle differences: a slightly damp spot near the door, a rough patch of stone that catches the broom. These small observations guide action. Outside, the world remains muted. Stone walls and thatch roofs glimmer faintly with frost. Animals stir, softly, measured in their motions. You begin with the familiar rounds, feeding chickens, checking goats, ensuring that animals are secure. Each action is repetition of yesterday and the day before. But subtle changes, a lean of a post, a shift in a gate, require awareness. The rhythm of tasks is intertwined with perception. You listen for sound, the distant crow of a rooster, the shuffle of a neighbor moving tools, the faint clatter of a bucket in the yard. Each informs your actions. You adjust timing, sequence, and attention based on these signals. Water is fetched carefully, each bucket lifted with attention to strain on the back and balance in the hands. Even in repetition there is consciousness. Avoid splashing, maintain grip, respect the weight. Every movement is both action and meditation. By mid-morning you notice the gradual warmth of sunlight creeping across walls and ground. Shadows lengthen softly. Fatigue begins to settle into shoulders and legs, subtle but persistent. You pause briefly, resting hands on knees, taking a slow breath, feeling the quiet accumulation of effort over hours. You resume work, mending a fence, checking grain stores, carrying tools to their proper places. Each movement is precise. The order matters, not for spectacle, not for applause, but because consistency maintains both physical and social stability. Children begin to appear near paths, imitating older workers in quiet play. They mimic gestures, bending, lifting, sweeping, before understanding fully. Observation teaches them as it teaches you. Presence matters. Practice matters. Awareness matters. Even meals are carried out in muted rhythm. Bread is divided in measured portions. A small bowl of porridge or stew is consumed deliberately. Conversation is gentle, low, and restrained. There is no laughter that rises sharply. There is no speech that challenges hierarchy. Every interaction confirms the fabric of village life. The afternoon brings slight heat or wind depending on the season. Your body responds slowly to environmental shifts. Fatigue thickens. The weight of repetition is felt in back and limbs. Yet work continues. You adjust pace but do not cease. Pause but do not linger. Every act reinforces reliability. By evening, sunlight softens into gentle gold, lengthening shadows across stone and earth. Tasks for the day are completed in measured sequence. Tools are cleaned, stored, inspected. Animals are checked once more. Doors and gates are secured. Even in rest, small motions continue. You arrange bedding, fold cloth, tie loose straps. Each act demonstrates attention, presence, and care. Even absence would speak, silently signaling neglect or oversight. When you finally settle near the hearth, firelight dancing softly across walls, the day's weight lingers. Muscles ache gently, hands throb faintly. Mind is calm, alert, and reflective. The repetition of small tasks has built a rhythm, and that rhythm itself is sustaining. You lie down, aware that tomorrow will mirror today. The same patterns will guide your steps, your hands, your attention. Small acts accumulate into survival. Repetition forms both skill and character. Quiet persistence ensures place and purpose in a world governed by subtle, unwritten rules. And as the embers glow, shadows stretching across the walls, you let fatigue settle fully, your body aligning once more with the world's slow, patient cadence. The sun climbs slowly higher in the sky, spilling pale light across the village. Shadows move quietly across stone and earth, stretching and folding in rhythm with the day. You rise again, your body aware of the cycle before your mind fully registers it. Tasks continue without announcement. You begin with animal care, checking goats and chickens, ensuring water is clean, feed is sufficient. Every movement is deliberate, mindful, and careful. You bend, lift, and carry, aware of strain, but allowing it to settle steadily into your limbs. The rhythm of survival is subtle. It is not urgent or dramatic, but persistent. Miss one small detail, leave water slightly dirty. Forget a gate latch. Neglect the sweep of a floor, and consequences accumulate quietly. Work not completed now becomes more difficult later. Small failures ripple through time. You pause briefly, brushing sweat from your brow, listening to distant sounds. A neighbor moving tools in the yard. Birds moving in arcs above rooftops. The faint murmur of children imitating adults in play. Each sound informs your awareness. You adjust pace, posture, attention. You do not need to speak. Observation guides action. By mid-morning, fatigue builds slowly. Limbs ache lightly. Hands throb faintly with repetition. Yet stopping entirely is not an option. Even pauses are measured, a moment to rest, to drink, to observe. Continuity matters more than comfort. You notice patterns in the day. The way light falls across the field informs you of time. Shadows on the walls indicate hour. Wind shifting across rooftops suggests upcoming weather. Subtle changes in animal behavior indicate need or discomfort. Awareness is layered. Observation is constant. Labor continues in repetition. Tools must be maintained. Grain checked. Fences inspected. Water carried. Each act is simple, yet together they create stability. You do not rush, you do not hesitate. You move with quiet precision. Children mimic your movements, learning early that survival is not just work, it is attention, presence, and awareness. They repeat small gestures, bending, lifting, pouring, observing. Even play becomes rehearsal for endurance, for adherence to rhythm, for alignment with unspoken rules. Meals follow. Bread, porridge, or simple stew is consumed slowly, deliberately. Conversation is quiet and measured. Words are few but meaningful. Gestures are precise. The positioning of cups and bowls, the order of serving, the subtle nods and pauses, all reinforce pattern, respect, and observation. The afternoon stretches long. Sunlight softens, shadows lengthen, and fatigue continues to accumulate. You pause more frequently, stretching muscles, adjusting posture, taking measured breaths. Each pause is deliberate, maintaining continuity without halting rhythm. The environment itself shapes you. Frosted earth in winter, thick mud in spring, heavy heat in summer, all demand small adjustments. You alter gait, grip, pace, and sequence. Survival is embedded in these adaptations. You do not resist them. You accept them. By late afternoon, the village exudes quiet order. Tasks are nearly complete. Animals settled. Tools stored. Gates secured. Floors swept. Meals prepared. Each small act reinforces the structure of life. The day has been unremarkable, yet essential. Evening arrives without fanfare. Firelight glows softly inside cottages. Smoke curls upward. Shadows stretch long. You check the final tasks, tighten a strap, mend a tear, stoke embers. Every action confirms attention and presence. Finally you settle near the hearth, limbs heavy but steady. Your eyes follow the slow dance of flames. The day has passed with quiet persistence. Fatigue is not acute. It is deep, dull, and comfortable in its rhythm. Tomorrow, the sequence will begin again. You will rise, move, observe, act, and rest. The pattern repeats endlessly, each small act accumulating into survival, reliability, and identity within the village. And as you let your body sink slowly into rest, you feel the weight of continuity, the subtle, unbroken rhythm that keeps the village alive, that binds each inhabitant to task, to observation, to one another. Evening deepens, the village becomes a study in restraint and subtle motion. You walk slowly along familiar paths, feeling the day's repetition echo in muscles and joints. Movement itself carries meaning. Each step, each gesture, each breath participates in the fabric of community life. You check the animals once more. Goats and sheep shift gently in their pens, anticipating care without need for noise. Chickens cluck softly as you approach. You feed, adjust, secure. Your movements are deliberate, precise, quiet. Even the smallest misstep would be noticed, silently. Tasks remain simple but essential. A strap tightened here, a gate checked there, embers adjusted in the hearth. Every act confirms presence and competence. You are aware of your own body's limits, calibrating effort to avoid exhaustion while maintaining reliability. Fatigue is constant but tolerable, an unspoken companion that deepens attention. Silence dominates. Not oppressive silence, but active, attentive quiet. It is a backdrop against which observation unfolds. You notice the lean of a roof, the alignment of a fence, the subtle tilts of neighboring cottages. Each detail conveys history, care, and expectation. You observe others without interaction. A neighbor moves along the path, carrying tools in steady rhythm. Children pause near the well, echoing adult gestures. Even absent words, every action communicates. You learn to read motion, posture, and sequence as carefully as any conversation. The hearth calls again. Inside, soft amber light illuminates walls and worn furniture. You tend embers, inspect utensils, and adjust bedding. Every small movement reinforces attention, order, and rhythm. You understand that survival is as much about diligence in tiny acts as it is about larger, more obvious labor. Meal preparation continues in subtle ritual. Grain measured, bread broken, water poured, cups placed in sequence. Conversation is sparse, respectful, and deliberate. Laughter is quiet and brief. Each act confirms social alignment. There is no spectacle, no urgency. Fatigue thickens gently. Muscles ache in familiar ways. Hands are calloused but capable. You stretch slowly, aware of tension settling into the shoulders, neck, and back. The day's weight does not diminish with nightfall. It accumulates, layering over days, months, years. Endurance is built quietly, without recognition or applause. You notice the subtle cues of hierarchy once more. Elders resting near the fire, children observing, adults adjusting position slightly in deference. Even posture communicates attention and respect. You practice these without conscious thought, body and mind aligning to expectations learned over long experience. Night deepens, shadows lengthen and fold, smoke rises from chimneys and thin threads. Even the air seems tempered, guiding motion, limiting abruptness. You move slowly, carefully, completing final tasks with minimal disturbance. You pause, sitting near the hearth. Firelight flickers across stone walls, illuminating hands and tools. You feel the accumulation of small acts, care given, attention maintained, tasks repeated. Each repetition reinforces understanding, presence, and reliability. Sleep approaches gradually, carried by habit and quiet endurance. You lie down with body aligned, mind aware of subtle lessons learned, and breath slowed by repetition. You understand that survival in this world is less about dramatic achievement and more about persistent observation, steady work, and silent compliance with the rhythm of daily life. Tomorrow will arrive, indistinct from today. The same patterns, the same rules, the same quiet vigilance will continue. You will rise, observe, act, and rest. The accumulation of small, careful acts will endure, weaving continuity, presence, and survival into the fabric of existence. In this way, the world teaches without words, it molds without force, it preserves without urgency, and you, attentive and steady, become part of its unspoken order. Night has fully settled. The village is hushed beneath a soft blanket of darkness. Smoke curls in thin, pale threads from chimneys. Embers glow faintly in hearths, their light reflecting on stone and wooden surfaces. The world feels intimate, compressed, and alive in small, quiet ways. You lie down, aware of the day that is past. Limbs ache gently, muscles still recalling repeated motions. Hands are calloused but capable. The body remembers effort even as consciousness drifts toward rest. Each repetition, each careful gesture, each observation of others has accumulated, shaping endurance, habit, and subtle understanding. You reflect quietly on what the day has taught, that presence is as vital as action, that observation often teaches more than speech, that small acts, repeated patiently, build continuity and reliability, that hierarchy, though unwritten, guides interaction as powerfully as any law, that silence carries meaning alongside words, sometimes more precisely. The lessons are subtle, persistent, and gentle. They unfold slowly, like the curves of smoke rising in still air, like the soft glow of embers that will burn through the night. You do not need dramatic moments to feel the weight of understanding. Knowledge arrives gradually, layered over repetition, attention, and careful endurance. Even modern comfort feels distant in this reflection. The warmth of a hearth, the measured rhythm of tasks, the quiet adherence to invisible codes all offer a calmness that is deliberate and earned. You are reminded that life is not always defined by spectacle or urgency, but by patience, observation, and careful participation in the world around you. You think of neighbors, friends, children, elders each contributing in ways both visible and imperceptible. Every small action reverberates quietly, sustaining community, maintaining rhythm, preserving order. Each ember, each footprint, each gesture is part of an invisible lattice of understanding and survival. In these moments, you allow the mind to drift. Reflection mingles with sensation. The ache in the shoulders, the warmth of the fire, the soft glow on the walls. Breath deepens. Limbs relax further. Awareness softens into presence. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin anew. You will rise, move, observe, act, and rest. The patterns will continue, unbroken, persistent, guiding your every motion. The small acts of survival, respect, and attention accumulate over time, quietly weaving the fabric of your existence into the ongoing life of the village. And yet, for now, there is only release, the quiet understanding that you are aligned with rhythm, that effort and observation have left their mark, that presence itself is meaningful. You let your mind drift, surrendering to the slow pull of sleep, carried by the steady cadence of small, deliberate acts. The world outside continues without fanfare. Smoke rises, embers glow, shadows fold, animals settle. Neighbors rest. You are part of this rhythm, integrated and whole, a participant in a world defined by gentle endurance, quiet observation, and the persistent weight of small, essential acts. Sleep comes slowly, softly, and without rush. There is no need for dramatic resolution. The day has been lived fully in its quiet, measured way, and the lessons, the rhythms, the unspoken understandings, they will remain, waiting to guide the next day, the next motion, the next breath. You drift, carried by continuity. The unwritten rules remain. The village breathes softly around you. Presence, patience, and endurance persist quietly, and you too persist, aligned with the world in its steady, gentle cadence. Rest now. There is no need to do more tonight. You have participated, you have observed, you have endured, and in that endurance you are already prepared for the rhythm of tomorrow.